all, and welcome back to Homeschooling with Classic Stories. Today I wanted to talk to you about our schedules. So, how do we schedule our time for homeschooling? I'll go ahead and give you a spoiler alert. It is not as long as you think it takes. So, if you are worried about putting in a 6 hour or 8 hour, however long day of schooling, no, you really don't have to do that for homeschooling. So, as a reminder, my son is 4.5 years old, so we for this channel are talking about specifically pre-kindergarten. And so, I wanted to go ahead and start this by saying that my husband and I both work full time outside of the home. Uh, the thing is that we work different hours. So we are both teachers, but my teaching hours are scheduled for the morning mostly, and my husband's hours are scheduled for the evening mostly. There's an occasional overlap, during which time, we make it work. Um, if you are a family that doesn't have this option of having two caregivers who work different hours, and you don't have a parent who stays at home, then a lot of families choose to use facilities like daycare or a nanny or some other caregiver. And during that time, the child engages in just undesignated free play, or maybe they even do another program. And then in the evenings, or whenever there is time, some families even just do weekends. They choose to homeschool at that time. So you can do this really whatever time you have available to you. It doesn't have to be the set, 8 to 3 or whatever your school day looks like in your area. So do keep that in mind. I do want to go ahead and start by saying that we really emphasize unstructured play. So that is by far most of our day is focusing on unstructured play. We also focus a lot on getting outdoors. So that's usually how we start our day. So once everything is done, teeth are brushed. So in the morning, teeth are brushed, breakfast is eaten, clothes are put on, whatever it is that my son needs to do to get ready for the day. He then usually goes outside. He's outside for usually about an hour to an hour and a half. That's usually taking a bike ride to a playground and then playing at the playground and then riding his bike back. Um, he's obviously with my husband when he does this. He's not out doing it by himself at 4.5 years old. But usually that's how he starts the day. This is a really good way to start the day for us because my son is a bit high energy in the morning. He tends to wake up very early, very energized, and so that's what works for our family. If your child is a little bit slower to rise in the morning, then perhaps your day would proceed a little bit slower. So maybe you could start with story time or something that's a little slower to start the day rather than going full fledged into bike riding and playing and all that sort of thing. Anyway, the next thing we do is after he comes home, he usually does a puzzle. And I'll probably do another video on the puzzles that we have in our house. They range um, from a lot of different choices, a lot of different styles, but he just picks a puzzle that he wants to do for the day. It's very self-directed at this point. He knows as soon as he gets home from outside, he goes, puts his things away, washes his hands, and then goes to get a puzzle. That is not some sort of miraculous parenting tip that I have. That is a lot of work that we did in preschool in making sure that he has a routine down. So this isn't something that's going to magically happen for your family. We did a lot of work in preschool for trying to get him into a schedule and trying to get him to be a little more self-sufficient. He doesn't get it right every morning. A lot of mornings he doesn't, and that's okay. So I don't want you to get the impression that things are perfect. They are not. But he goes and gets a puzzle. He comes back. It's usually a floor puzzle that he chooses because he prefers those at the moment. He sorts the pieces and he does it largely by himself. He usually calls one of us over, whoever is with him at that point, over to take a look at the puzzle that he has completed. We celebrate it, and then he cleans it up and puts it away. Again, not always perfectly, but that is generally how it is meant to go and often how it goes. Again, lots of work has gone into this. If your child has never done a puzzle before, please know you are going to have to sit down next to your child and sort through the pieces and talk about colors and shapes and all of those things. So there's a lot of work to going into whatever level of self-sufficiency you would like for your child to have. The reason we start this way is I am not very functional if I don't finish my cup of coffee. And so this is usually the time where while he's doing the puzzle, I finish my cup of coffee, or if the breakfast dishes didn't get done, or just something that I need to do to start the day. That's usually what happens during this time. Um, if you need to take a shower, um, whatever it is that you need to do for life. And then the next thing that we do is that's when we really start what most people would consider homeschooling. We consider all of it homeschooling, but most people would say that homeschooling is the next part that we do. And the next part we do is two subjects. Our subjects are really variable. We are not trying to hit any sort of hours on math and hours on letters. We're not doing any of that. We are instead using the Beatrix Potter stories to direct what we want to do that week. So our subjects are based around the story and what we feel fits best with the story. So, like last week for Peter Rabbit, we did some math and some letters, and some other pieces as well. But this week, um, maybe we get to something else with Squirrel Nutkin. Maybe we're going to focus more on science with Squirrel Nutkin. So it just changes week to week what two subjects we do for each of the days. Every day we do a different subject. So all 5 days have different subjects to them. It also depends on his mood. If he's a little moodier, we try and do a subject that he really likes. If he seems very neutral and open, then we try and pick something that's maybe a little bit more challenging. So keep in mind your child's mood might influence the plan that you think you have for that day. The next thing that we do is a board game. I'll probably do another video on our different board games that we have. Um, but it's usually something that is meant to build family, um, meant to build sharing and cooperation and that taking turns, that sort of thing. So board game is next. And then following that, we usually read either the Beatrix Potter story. We just read through that and we do that for 3 of the days. Um, and then the other 2 days, so like Tuesday, Thursday, we usually let him choose two books. So, for example, today he chose The Rabbit Listened, which is relatively short, and Where the Wild Things Are, which again is relatively short. So, if you think about the length of the Beatrix Potter stories, they're quite long, whereas two shorter books it's roughly the same amount of time. In honesty, all the things that I've described from getting home and taking out that puzzle all the way down to reading the two books, all of that is usually from 9 a.m. until about 10:30 or 10:45, depending on how long things take. We don't spend more than 15, 20 minutes on every activity. It can go longer if he's really enjoying it, but 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, something like that. That's super normal. Please don't expect your child to sit down and do an hour lesson. If your child can do that, that's great. But more often than not, that's probably going to backfire and lead to frustration with both of you. So try and keep it short. Again, our official homeschooling from the puzzle to the book reading is really only an hour and a half of the day. As far as what we do the rest of the day, usually at 10:30, sort of our lives kind of start then. This is the point where if I need to go grocery shopping or we need to go to the library or whatever it is that we need to do, this is usually the point where we go out and do those things. Um, of course, we can move homeschooling around. We're not super rigid in our schedule, but we do try and keep it to the 9 to 10:30 only because my son performs better at that particular time of day and he's very set in the schedule. If we choose to move things around, some days we'll even just skip homeschooling. We don't necessarily make it up later either. I showed you the Kumon book that we're using. If I'm out at a restaurant or something. If we're waiting for our food, he'll do the Kumon book, and that really counts as homeschooling for the day, and we're fine with that. We do homeschool all the days. Most curriculums are 36 weeks, and that's great if that's your style. Our family style is we just homeschool all the weeks unless we are on vacation, which COVID, so that's not us right now. Or if there's a holiday in which the whole family is home. So, for example, my 2.5-year-old goes to daycare. If daycare is closed for a holiday or something, then we do things as a family. We go out on a hike, or we go out and do something different, to the pool or something different. Um, so we're not super rigid in trying to hit the 180 days, but we by far exceed those in time. And of course, it's pre-kindergarten, so you shouldn't, to my knowledge, have any requirements anyway. But if you are trying to keep track, do try and count the days. If you want to just make a note of the subjects, that's nice. If you are trying to do record keeping at all, but of course, check your state's laws or your province's laws, but you probably don't have to do any of that. So that's what we do for scheduling. If you have any other questions about what our schedule or what our life is like, you can leave a comment below. Or if you would like, just tell us about your schedule. Everyone's schedule is different. And that's kind of one of the nice things about homeschooling, is that we all do it a little differently and we all end up sort of at the same goal of having educated children. So that's one of the nice things. So I'll see you in the next video. Have a lovely second week.